Hello and welcome to the CX Files for February 6th, 2025. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in El Salvador this week.
And I'm back in Montreal. I'm Peter Ryan, by the way, just in case anybody was wondering. Yes, a return to Canada and nice to be back. The last time I was in El Salvador was with you, Mark, back in 2017.
Yeah, that was good. That was good fun. That was a great trip, wasn't it? We certainly engaged with a lot of people. We had a conference, but also a chance to visit quite a few companies as well.
Quite a few companies. We had a chance to visit a little heritage UNESCO village, which was a lot of fun, and just get to know what is an incredibly charming place with some absolutely fantastic people. So enjoy your time there.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. I will try to do that. This week, we are talking to one of the best known analysts in the business. Phil Fersht founded HFS Research more than a decade ago. I think that was about 2010, wasn't it? So
Correct.
it's more like 15 years now.
Yeah.
And he's well known as very outspoken within the industry, always speaks his mind. In fact, I believe that HFS Research came out of his Horses for Sources blog, where he was basically just blogging about BPO, CX, technology outsourcing, and eventually the blog became so popular that it became a sort of source of knowledge for the industry and turned into a analyst firm. So, Phil's been around for a while. You certainly know him very well, don't you,
Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Phil and what he's done for the industry. One of the things that I've always appreciated about Phil and what he brings to the table is his willingness to call a spade, to put out contrarian opinions when they need to be put out, not to go along with hype cycles. And I think he's brought a tremendous dose of realism to the analyst space. And that's why I was so excited when you were able to pull together a chat with him, because obviously he's got some very strong opinions on the direction that all things are going CX. And maybe what are some of the highlights that you pulled out of the chat with him?
Well, the main focus was AI, and really, I called him up. I commented on something that he posted on LinkedIn, which was the sort of continuum of AI development within CX. He'd looked at AI, then generative AI, and agentic AI, which he was talking about as something that's now becoming very important. But he was already talking about artificial general intelligence, and suggesting that we're not far off from much more intelligent AI systems, and we need to basically get prepared to work with the tech industry on CX solutions much more than we have done in the past, where BPO has focused on the contact center. So Phil was basically saying, look, this is now a technology play. This is what we need to be exploring. So I called him up to say, well, how long do you think we've got, and how far are we down this continuum, really?
And I think these are very logical questions to ask him, because I would actually agree. And I think that the BPOs, in a large degree up until now, have been either Luddites or they have been completely unprepared, and they've been scrambling in terms of figuring out how they can incorporate different tech elements into what they're up to. Mark, I said to someone not long ago that if you were to take a look at every BPO's website, say every medium to large BPO's website, and take a look under their tech offerings, more or less, you would see the exact same thing and the exact same marketing speak. That has to that has to change. And to be fair to a lot of the BPOs, I think it is changing, but there's a lot of catching up to do. And that's why I'm really excited to hear what Phil has to say in this regard.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that essentially what we're saying is, are we now coming at CX as a primarily technology focused solution, with a small amount of human interaction, which I guess you can essentially outsource yourself? Or are we saying that the BPOs will be able to embrace the technology and utilize their experience of customer service design, but sort of bringing the tech into their platforms?
Well, look, I would recommend that we head on over to your chat with Phil Fersht from HFS Research to find out a little bit more where he sees the CX industry going and this intersection of human as well as technology in terms of driving the best interactions.
Right, Phil, I asked you onto this first because given your prominence in the industry, I can't believe you've never been on CX Files before. Although there is a podcast that I did years and years ago called Talking Outsourcing, and I think that you were on an episode in 2010. So there is a recording of us talking from a long time ago. But yeah, you've never been on this podcast, and you recently posted something on LinkedIn that was kind of like an AI timeline. You said something like, we started out with RPA to automate tasks. We graduated to Gen AI. Before agentic came along, and that allowed us to do things autonomously and collaboratively, and eventually AGI is going to supplant us and ASI will outperform us. I mean, looking at that, how far down this journey do you think that we really are in terms of the CX case studies that we see day to day?
Yeah, I think the tech is moving faster than we can process what's going on right now. Now, when we started out with RPA back in 2012, the technology was, it was really, OCR tech and macros, and it was sort of stitching together, systems and documents that didn't work too well. It was all fairly unsexy stuff, and a lot of it, when companies, did an RPA deal, it would often get dumbed down 2 or 3 levels below the CFO or the head of supply chain, and it sort of got lost a bit. It wasn't sexy technology; it was sort of functional tech. And but even back then, we were talking about bots replacing humans and where this could all eventually go, and when we get better AI, blah blah blah. Fast forward, I guess, 12 years. I think what's happening now is the impact we're seeing with video and text and reality, which is really changing the conversation. Like, we can see how someone can literally, fake an image of an avatar of Mark Hillary and have him talking online with your voice sounding credibly like you in 5 minutes flat. I've done it to me already. Super Phil, if you ever saw it. So what is possible is now very much staring us in the face. And now I think we're in this period of, okay, so how do we actually adopt this? Where do we put it? How do we get our teams excited about this? Because right now, if you go to your head of marketing or head of sales or head of CX and say, hey, can you start creating agents based on what you do? You're probably going to they'll give you a very strange look and say, why should I start redesigning my job into a piece of software so you can get rid of me? I'm not going to do that. So you have to then go to the managers and say, can you start creating the jobs that your underlings do and put them in agentic software and mimic their activities, et cetera, et cetera. So right now, I think we're in a cycle of, we know it's all out there. We know the stuff can do some pretty amazing things, but where do we start? Where does it get adopted? Does it really make sense? And I think we're in the sense-making part of the conversation. So in CX, for example, the one thing I keep hearing is some of these Gen AI tools are really good at translation capability and voice capability, which has been the bugbear of call centers for decades. Suddenly, if that's got way better, it's way more efficient, it's slicker, it's faster. You don't need to have Rolls-Royce call centers in Manila and Jamaica and places like that. Then I think the call center business is under a lot of threat. I mean, look at the market cap of companies like Concentrix. It's like 10 billion in rev and 2 billion in market cap. I mean, that's insane. Like, the Wall Street, they're not stupid. You saw what happened this week with DeepSeek, and just the simple fact that we can suddenly crunch through this stuff way faster and quicker than we thought. Even if this gets boycotted and this has security flaws and issues, the future is unraveling right in front of us, and AI is becoming much more prevalent, much more available, much more real, and everyone knows they need to get ahead of it.
Do you think, I was going to ask about DeepSeek, because do you think that that's about to put a rocket under this? Because one thing I think that was happening was people were realizing just how expensive training LLMs really is. You know, we were listening to these people in California telling us how it's tens of billions of dollars to do this, and they're starting to work out how can they get the language models to train themselves, and all this kind of stuff. And then the Chinese come along and say, well, for $5 million, we've managed to do something that matches what OpenAI are doing. So do you think that it's kind of like with the wheels are just spinning faster now?
Well, I mean, heaven forbid the Chinese came along and figured out how to do it cheaper. But what's really impressive is the system DeepSeek uses activate specialized modules only when necessary, and I think it ensures that something only about of the 671 billion total parameters that OpenAI uses, only 37 billion are active at any given time. The training costs of around 100 million are reduced to about 5 million because of you only need 2,000 GPUs, not 100,000 GPUs. The numbers are insane. It's not like saying this stuff is even half as efficient. It's 100% more efficient. So this has sent big shockwaves through the industry. I'm feeling a few grand lighter myself. Whatever ETF funds I've got, and it's like, wow, that hurts. But yeah, this is going to make AI even more accessible than ever, more scalable. You hear about like the $500 billion of Stargate funding. Everyone's starting to look at it and thinking, is it really going to need $500 billion? It doesn't look like it. So there's a lot of very big numbers, a lot of very large investments that are tied to AI that are now being seriously questioned. Like, is this really going to be this expensive? And end of the day, is this Nadella and Zuckerberg? Who's going to make the real money out of this? Or is this now starting to be democratized? And I get the sense this is the start of the democratization of AI. It's great news for regular run-of-the-mill businesses trying to adopt AI, because now we can look at this more efficiently, cheaper, better, more scalable. The cost of adopting multilingual translation software is suddenly going to come down as well. It's not going to be as insanely as expensive as it was before. So while this is a threat to some of the legacy businesses hoping to seriously profit from AI, I think it's also a big opportunity for ambitious firms thinking, hey, look, it's more tech, it's cheaper, it's faster, it's better, it's cheap, it's usable.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that? A lot of this has really happened since ChatGPT was launched at the end of 22. Yeah. So it's really the last couple of years. But do you think a lot of companies have been distracted by this? We've got people talking about their AI strategy for CX and improving their contact center and automating. Every mundane task that agents need to perform is all now automated, and they're talking about all this stuff, but they still don't have a decent WhatsApp channel, or there's lots of basic stuff that still doesn't work, yet they're talking AI.
I know, it's absolutely infuriating, isn't it? You can't even you can't book a flight online. None of the systems talk to each other. You can't do an email migration from Google to Microsoft without hundreds of horrible bugs creeping in. It's like you've got one world where everything is working seamlessly and beautifully, and reality where everything is so fucking hard. And that's been the story of call center technology for the last 30 years. Is IVR, security, queuing systems, telecom systems, right? You can't just rip this all up, throw it out the way, and introduce some nice language models. No, you have to actually understand how processes work, how data is collected, how security guidelines are met and compliance guidelines are met. And you've got to get your own people excited about this and on board. Because if people are thinking, why do I need to get excited about technology that's going to replace me? You're never going to adopt the technology. You've got to get your people excited. I remember walking around companies 20 years ago as a young consultant, talking to people about, it'd be great if you can send these tasks off to India. And now you can do cooler stuff yourself. So get that person to do all the data entry, get that person to do this administration over here. So you can now focus on creating strategic reports for your management, or calling clients and having a strategic conversation with them, that sort of thing. The same thing's happening now with computers. Saying, imagine how great it would be if you can get your app to do all this stuff, so you don't have to do this anymore, and you can do this instead. People aren't buying that. People aren't buying that like they did a bit with the offshore phenomenon.
Yeah. I mean, I think we learned 20 odd years ago, around the time of the millennium, that just because something is technically possible doesn't mean that everyone is going to do it. And I think, we're seeing exactly the same thing all over again. And I suppose that leads me into, on your list of different types of AI that people are adopting, you'd kind of put agentic in the middle, which I think was sort of like present day. This is the thing that everybody is looking at. But hasn't this actually been around for a few years anyway? I mean, I can remember people maybe talking about this at least sort of 2-3 years ago.
All right. I remember, you might remember IPsoft Amelia, which was the famous avatar, which was doing the rounds 10 years ago. Lovely company. They had the idea then. They were selling licenses in Amelia for 18K per head per year to replace humans in call centers or banking support, shared services, things like that. It was actually very possible then. I mean, the technology wasn't using the latest large language models, but it used its own language libraries. It could do a lot of the work back then. But one, it was too expensive. And two, the vendors wanted too much money. Like, you're thinking, why would I spend 18K a year for a piece of software to do the job of a human when I can hire someone in Manila for that price, right? I'd rather have a human do the job. It's simple as that. The difference, I think now, it's all down to cost and money. Now, if you can hire a better quality bot to do an automated job for cents on the dollar versus thousands per FT per year, you're going to start looking at this. So you can say, hey, you're looking at, I know one company which has 50,000 call center agents. They can already cut that number in half overnight using various types of LLM technology and underpinned with the right infrastructure. But they're like, well, why do we have to do that now? It's a lot of people. It's a lot of issues. It's a lot of unions getting involved. It's a lot of exposure, that sort of thing. But it's now much more available. So companies are looking at, we're spending how much? 100 million a year on our CX, and we can now get number 20. That's going to happen. And that is already happening. And that's why the valuations of these colossus call center businesses are cradling, because everyone can see what is eventually going to take place. But I guess the question here is, how you can manage the shrinkage over time. So concentrics over time, picking on them, for example, will evolve the model. They'll have to get more involved in LLM-based delivery and agentic delivery, all this sort of stuff. And they're going to have to figure out how do they supplement their revenues in other ways than they were before.
Yeah. I mean, it feels like that old argument that as we get more productive, we can all work less, and we'll get down to the sort of 12 or 15 hours a week because we're then producing everything that we used to produce in 40 hours. And it's sort of like the same thing with agentic now. Every professional employee will actually become a manager of 5 or 6 bots that are kind of helping them to do their work. And it's not that we are going to be able to work 2 hours a day, is it? We're suddenly going to be producing the work of 5 people each.
Yep. That is exactly where we're going. And look, the work at home phenomenon, the pandemic, it's changed how people, I think about work. People want to work less. People prioritize more. I think travel is at its highest level ever. Pleasure travel, not business travel. People like traveling. People live their lives. People are less devoted to their companies as they were in the past, but they still want to do their jobs and they still want to earn their paychecks. So the smart people are figuring out, how do I do my job a little smarter, a little more effectively, and that sort of thing. So this is happening. And ultimately, if people can figure out, I can get this technology to free up my time, they'll do it. If they're told to use technology to free up their time, but it doesn't really free up their time, they're not going to do it. So a lot of this is consumer driven ultimately. You need people individually to get more curious and excited about agentic themselves. Just think, oh, this is great. I can actually get this thing to answer my calls for me now. So I can answer only 10% of the calls I was doing before. I can just turn my agentic on, go out and go shopping, walk the dog. I don't know. This is the sort of stuff that's happening, and it is in play. But I think this gets down to a generational thing of younger folks today who adapt to this technology faster and quicker will immediately think, can I get a piece of technology to do this, or do I have to do it myself? And I think that's going to be the mindset.
Yeah. And do you think then, when we're sort of bringing this back to the BPOs and the CX environment, I mean, we've talked constantly now about how the technology is evolving the interface between brands and the customer, whether that's AI or putting all the infrastructure in the cloud. Basically everything is kind of tech led nowadays. And yet you go back 10, 20 years, everything revolved around the contact center. Even the pricing models were entirely FTEs. It was, how many agents do we have in the center? That's how much the service is going to cost you. And yet now it feels, if I don't know, let's say I'm launching a fintech, it's completely new and we're scaling up. We've got 2 people in customer service and we want to, build that out and make it more robust. Would I be just looking at some tech software to help me do that, or would I be calling up a BPO?
It's already happening. I saw a deal in the supply chain space recently where we had we call it services as software, a sort of a tech-led solution competing against a BPO solution. The BPO solution was 30 FDEs and some frameworks. The tech-led solution was about 3 FDEs and a bunch of pretty decent technology and agentic capability. And it was about 5 million less. So the BPO was about 15 million. The tech-led deal was about 10, and the client went for the $10 million deal. They said, I'd rather save the money, and I want technology, and I don't care so much about how many people you have supporting the tech. This is what's going on right now, is people are asking less and less questions around how many people are behind the scenes supporting versus I actually would like to have access to more of a software-driven approach to getting things done. Now, our data shows 6 out of 10 enterprises are willing to start supplementing or replacing professional services with AI in the next 5 years. That could even accelerate further, especially now we're seeing the prices come down. But that's the level at what we're looking at. People are just trying to get more done for less. Hyper productivity is a big watchword now. And how do we just be more productive with what we've got? And you're seeing, for example, I think Harvard grads are finding it harder than ever to find jobs. And it's not just the fact that they're all picky and are doing jobs they want. A lot of companies are looking at, we don't need to keep adding now because we're using AI. The AI effect is starting to creep into the employment world. And companies are looking at, can we do more with technology than we do with people?
It feels like it's changed. The sort of like the front end interface is increasingly based on technology. But we keep on hearing everybody in this industry say there's still a role for humans in customer service. I mean, certainly if you were doing something that requires empathy, like calling up, a life insurance company because a relative just died or something like that, where you can't imagine it being automated. But surely a lot of those tasks are quite limited. So, are we going to see a lot more than what we traditionally just say are simple interactions? Where is my pizza? Where is my package? That stuff can easily be automated. But is there going to be like a much greater percentage that becomes automated, leaving only those kind of roles that need empathy for the human agents?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this should have happened 10 years ago, in my opinion. But it was too cumbersome, too expensive. companies don't like to change very fast. I think it's accelerating now to the point of like if you have a healthcare insurance issue, most health questions can be whittled down to about 6 questions now and can be answered without you actually needing to talk to a human being. And quite honestly, if it's like, hey, I need a prescription for this or that or the other, do you care if you're talking to a human being? It's more about when it's necessary to have human contact on a particular issue. So you do raise a great point. And I think a company which manages its own healthcare insurance should have grief counseling lines, especially for something like that, or particular things that do, or if there's been an accident in the family, or if it's a particular complicated claim, or people want to talk about their bank accounts. They want to talk to human beings still when they call up their bank. You know, these are areas where I think it's down to smart judgment on where it makes business and emotional sense to have human contact versus bot contact. Like you go on an airline now, you really don't care about how nice the gate agent was and all this. So you just want to get on your plane. You want to have a queue as short as possible, and that sort of thing. So it's a lot about where it makes real sense still to have human interaction and content. I also think it's placing more value on where to have human interaction and content. So I don't know about you, I love American Express. Every time I call them up, they always answer the phone. They're very helpful. They'll help you with whatever idiotic question you have to ask. But hey, this is my money. And it's nice to have somebody there helping me increase my credit limit or get this paid or that or this, the other, or talk about my benefits, that sort of thing. So I think some businesses are finding more and more reasons to use CX to differentiate than ever. And having that human contact, I think, is actually adding value still versus being taken away. I'd hate it if it's just literally every time I call my bank, it's just automated. Or if you talk, or the other thing is though, if I do talk to somebody, I don't want to talk to some kid overseas who is literally, I could be talking to a robot. Right. Yeah. I want to talk to somebody who's actually a human being I can have a conversation with. So this also begs the question, human contact versus quality of human contact as well. So.
Yeah. I mean, I needed to call DHL earlier today for a package that's been held up at customs. And I did get through to an agent and all they told me was it's probably going to be okay. You know, this thing happens all the time, and it wasn't really all that assuring. I mean, I probably would have done better just to go through a sort of an automated chatbot that actually could have interacted with customs and tell me what the problem is. But yeah, it's sort of swings and roundabouts. Yeah, what works, and I suppose a good example is I saw one of the tech companies that they used the IRS website and they basically sucked all of the IRS regulations into their LLM and allowed you to just question it as a chatbot and ask questions. And of course, the IRS is notorious for answering hardly any calls from Americans who've got tax problems and actually just want to ask for help. But this chatbot was to my during, I mean, obviously I only went through a demo and asked it a few questions, but it was answering everything immediately and based on the rules that are there. And the rules change every year, I presume. So you can keep the thing up to date. And so there you can see where you can actually improve on the human service, just because there's not enough people doing the work anyway.
Yep. It really is an important point, and it's true. You want answers about your tax. It'd be nice to talk to somebody, but if you can't, you want answers, and then it's down to how effective is the technology at doing that. Because right now, you're absolutely right. You get past the hype. The technology is still failing us a lot with many different facets of life. Like, I'd love to be able to not have to call up my credit card company, but you have to talk to somebody still. It's going to take, I think, several years before you get to the point of a solution that's agentic, that is generally human. We wrote a piece at HFS about do not start to think of agents as human beings. That's a big mistake. Because one, you really will demoralize your own workers in the company if you start treating agents as like people. They're not. They're just intelligent bots. They're supplements for making us more productive as human beings, and that's an important, I think, a component of making this successful.
Yeah, that's really where I sort of wanted to wrap things up on the role of the human agent. And are we moving away from the kind of traditional, it's either minimum wage, if we're talking about agents that are based in places in Europe, or, for example, it's typically minimum wage or very close to minimum wage. And this is why we still see a lot of offshoring going on, because people are focused on cost. But as we sort of see the AI able to answer more and more complex questions, the questions that will eventually go to the human are basically the ones that Google and the AI can't handle, or where there's some sort of human empathy is needed. So it seems like you need subject matter experts. You need people who really understand how to engage on the products that company is selling. So we're not, how can we get away with continuing to pay them minimum wage?
It's true. The generic employee is probably on the wane. I mean, I went and got a mobile phone the other day, and I changed supplier, and I literally had to spend 2 hours in the showroom while a bunch of kids who had no idea what they're doing were calling up the different providers like Verizon and and it was like, I just wish I could have done this thing on. I really walked out of there wishing I'd just done this whole thing online. Because you got but if you'd got in, you'd actually had a specialist there who really understood mobile phones and technology and could have done it quickly, and maybe offered me some advice on, this is how to reconnect your Apple phone with the new software with your iWatch and blah, blah. That would have been high value. Instead, you're getting these untrained, unqualified people who are probably minimum wage employees who aren't very good, and it doesn't leave you with a good experience. So I think maybe this forces people to think, look, I need to learn, I need to trade, I need to learn how to do something, I need to add some value. People don't like talking to generic support staff who aren't adding any value whatsoever beyond moving you from one call to the next. Like calling up a company and saying, I need to pay my bill, but I also want to talk to someone about this, and I want to do this, and you get shunted around 3 or 4 different departments. It's like, why can't I just speak to one person who knew that bank and knew these basic processes? Because at the end of the day, people only ever ask for about 5 or 6 things. So why can't you get more specialized and more focused on that? And that requires more training, thinking differently about your job. Maybe don't need to employ as many people, but the people you do employ, train them better.
Yeah.
Higher caliber people. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Okay. All right. So let's wrap up then, and maybe just allow you to pitch what you're up to at HFS. Have you got anything exciting coming up in the next couple of months?
We do. We have a very large conference happening in Bangalore, India, in a couple of weeks on the future of global capability centers, which is growing they're growing at nearly 20% a year. This is the alternative to the BPO IT services world, where a lot more spend is shifting from the third-party providers into the in-house centers. So we'll be hosting a huge conference out there. And we have some famous cricketers and personalities in the industry and politicians joining us for that. And then we have our big flagship event in May in New York City. We had Scott Galloway as a keynote, the famous podcaster, recently. We're hoping to get him back in May as well, if possible. And we're continuing to pump out our vision for services as software. So go to our website, hfsresearch.com. Visit my own podcast, which is The Horse's Mouth, where we've got lots of interesting leaders in mainly the tech industry who are coming on board there as well. And we continue to have a lot of fun, and hopefully people can continue to engage with what we do.
All right, Phil, that's great. Thanks very much. We'll make sure to put links to everything in the show notes. Great to talk to you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast.
We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favourite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week.
I'll start that again.